Welcome to the I Now Pronounce You Divorced podcast, where we have three award-winning family law attorneys dive into intriguing topics like divorce, military divorce, custody and visitation, trust and estate planning, and all things family law. Join us as we provide a comprehensive viewpoint through the eyes of our experts and guests, aiming to educate and soothe our listeners. Get ready to tune in because I Now Pronounce You Divorced starts right now.
Hi, I'm Charles Hatley with Malone Hatley PC, and this is our podcast, I Now Pronounce You Divorced, where each week we discuss things that our clients are going through or that we have people calling in and asking for help going through. And our goal is to give you as much information as possible to hopefully help you through this arduous journey. So today, I'm joined by Rebecca Malone and Dan Cuneo, as always, and Mr. Chris Beck. So Chris, can you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and we can go from there?
Sure, perfect. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on your show. My name is Chris Beck. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at SoberLink. We do alcohol monitoring, specifically for child custody cases and family law. We have a technology that helps in that process to help mitigate conflict in divorce cases that tend to be kind of contentious when alcohol is involved. Yes.
Yeah, we are. And can you kind of just describe to us what the SoberLink system is?
Sure. So I actually have one here in front of me. It is a breathalyzer that we've combined with facial recognition software and then an internal way of sending those results in real time. So, for example, if you have someone that's struggling with their relationship with alcohol, they might be ordered or stipulated in the parenting plan to use our system either around parenting time only or potentially on a schedule where they're testing 2 to 3 times per day. So the monitor client would blow into the device, it confirms their identity, it's the BAC value, and then reports that to everyone that's part of the said monitoring agreement. So it could be anyone from the other co-parent to the attorneys that are involved in the case, maybe even a GAL or a mental health professional.
I was listening to an interview that you did with a judge, and I thought it was extremely interesting because I remember when I would really litigate that clients, when they were ordered to blow into, whether it was an interlock device or a device similar to yours, would say, oh, well, I was, using mouthwash or something like that. Can you maybe explain some of the technology that's in yours, in that SoberLink, that would help clients when they're saying, well, I used mouthwash or Listerine or something like that, and that's why there was alcohol on my breath?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I think you bring up one of the biggest things that are associated with breathalyzers, which people outside of our industry would call a false positive, right? We like to call it an incidental exposure to alcohol. When we get people to understand our technology, we ask that in their testing protocol, they don't eat, drink, vape, smoke, or do anything 20 minutes prior to taking a test. And this helps mitigate most of the things that would happen. But I understand that, life goes on. I have 5 kids and I'm just trying to juggle things as fast as I can. I can imagine if I had to do a program like SoberLink, I might be running out of the door right after I maybe use Listerine, typically has mouthwash in it, and I would test positive because the alcohol that's in the Listerine would then be blown into our device and it would have a positive reading. What's unique about the SoberLink system is we have a retest cycle. So every single test that is positive has to be confirmed by a confirmation test. And this is done 15 minutes after that initial positive. So our device will actually lock out. So you'll try and take a test right after because you're panicking maybe. But if you read the agreement and you understand the process and you've been educated on how to properly retest, you wait 15 minutes, you can rinse your mouth out, get away, get all of that incidental, alcohol or that might be in the mouth cavity out. And then we want to make sure we get a deep lung breath test. So 15 minutes later, they'll take a confirmation test. If that's positive, then the results will go out to all the parties that are associated with monitoring agreement that there has been a non-compliant test. But if they test compliant, then we know it was an incidental exposure to alcohol, and that whole event will be deemed compliant. No one will ever see that first positive test. That was just an incidental exposure.
So what are some other ways that you've seen people try to get around or try to make excuses when they have a positive test?
I always just go to Google and look at what the first thing that they say is. That's typically what people come up with. But there's all sorts of things that people say that has happened. Mouthwash, caused a positive. I don't know. It's hard to say. Maybe something like bread, maybe from pizza. I stuffed a bunch of pizza in my mouth and then I blew into the device and that caused a positive. There's so many different things out there, but if you think about why you're using this technology, you're using this technology to get access to your kiddos, you would make sure that you're following the deprivation period of 20 minutes. Don't eat, drink, or do any of those things 20 minutes to using our technology. And then make sure you follow the retest cycle in case there ever is an accident that you might have, introduced alcohol somehow into your mouth cavity and blown it into the device. 15 minutes later, you will blow compliant. All the research says that incidental exposure to alcohol in the mouth cavity will dissipate in 2 to 3 minutes. So 15 minutes, that's plenty of time. Yeah.
One time I saw a case, and I don't know how truthful this was, but on a public intoxication case where there was a positive breathalyzer result, and the man's defense was that he was on a particular diet. So he was in like really severe ketosis, and he claimed that was what caused the positive result. Have you ever seen anything like that? I don't know if it was legitimate or not, or if it was just an incredibly creative argument by his defense attorney. Is there any legitimacy to something like?
We're always trying to test things that we see on, maybe it's Reddit or some other social media, that ways in which to beat breathalyzer tests, and we try to replicate these types of things. And yes, I have heard about the keto diet and stuff like that. I think my wife tried to take me down that path probably about a year ago, I think, and I almost passed out from not having bread, I think. But anyways, we weren't able to replicate it. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but that's why we do the retest cycle. That's super important to making sure we confirm anything that might be an incidental exposure. Yeah.
You talked about the facial recognition technology, and a lot of this has to go with, how to avoid tampering with the technology. And through the evolution of this device, what was kind of like the first iteration, and what do you see the future of the tamper-proof technology being?
Yeah, it's always evolving. You're absolutely right. We have gone to different facial recognition softwares and wrote our own proprietary one based on the best features of a couple different ones from like Microsoft and Cognitext. And we're trying to make sure that we are using the best features of each one to have kind of a hybrid technology that has a very high rate of confirming identities. But we've even gone as far as, if our facial rec technology cannot confirm the identity, it goes to a second source. And this is a HIPAA compliant data source where you get a human to actually look at the picture and compare it with the master photo to see if it indeed is the person who's supposed to be taking the test. So we have a backup fail-safe just in case that facial recognition software cannot confirm the identity of the individual. Because sometimes, we're taking tests in bad light, or we forgot to take the test and we're in bed and we're trying to take it, with no light at all. So I've seen it all. And we have to make sure that we're always innovating. We're always trying to get to that next, technology, to make sure we're always innovating, because we're perceived as that top shelf technology in family law for alcohol monitoring. We want to make sure we maintain that position.
Could you walk us through the setup for when we have, whether it's practitioners listening in or clients, like what does that look like, and how often are you actually testing?
So we want the setup process to be as easy as possible for your clients. Most of what we do as helping is educate attorneys and other family law professionals about how our technology works. And then it's up to the client to actually go in and get started. So they would match their program that they choose with SoberLink with the order that was stipulated or ordered by the court. what we have is a robust website that has a get started button. You kind of go through that, it goes through a decision tree process about our different programs that we offer, different plans, and it all kind of runs in such a way that it can best fit the order that was put into place. And the second part of your question, Dan, can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. How often are clients supposed to be using this? Is it 3 times a day?
So that's a great question. We actually developed a protocol in 2016 with some of the best addiction professionals in the field, and the consensus paper was published in the in the Journal of Addiction Medicine, excuse me. And that suggested, testing frequency, how long you should be using the test, the technology, and a few other things. But when it talked about testing frequency, to answer your question, it was 2 to 3 times was what is seen as average. But when you get those real high conflict cases and someone that's maybe in denial or in a little bit more of a bad spot, 4 tests might be appropriate.
So I'm thinking back on a number of cases where alcohol use has been questioned or challenged, or it's been an issue. I can think of a number of cases where this could have been beneficial to just settle that argument right out of the gate. How often do you see people sort of volunteer, they're saying, I don't have a problem, the other person's accusing me of something, let me just prove it and get this out of the way?
Yeah, so we see some pretty savvy uses of our product where we do some preemptive monitoring, where they use our technology for 6 months prior to even going to court, so that they can kind of negate all of the accusations that they think will come up in the conversation. Here's a report from SoberLink. We were on their level 2 basic program. That's what I always recommend for preemptive monitoring, where you're doing 6 months of testing and you're testing 3 times a day on a schedule. So you can see that, hey, my client has had compliant behavior for 6 months, 3 tests a day, no issues here with their relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, I've actually advised clients to do that exact thing.
That's great.
When you start hearing the allegations of alcohol abuse, because unfortunately in divorces, there are people that will start throwing anything at the wall and see what sticks. Oh, well, they drink too much. And it's like, well, what do you mean they drank too much? They had a beer the other Friday night. It's not too much, man. But I've advised clients, let's walk into court with this power of this SoberLink. Can you kind of describe what SoberLink has done to ensure that your test results are admissible evidence?
Yeah, so we have a pretty robust compliance department that you're able to message them through compliance at SoberLink.com. And typically attorneys will message and say, I need records that have been, solidified by our custodian of records. They'd be signed with an affidavit. So they are business records and sent on to you as the attorney. I always recommend that, you're part of the monitoring agreement so that you can access records at any time. We have advanced reporting that is super easy to read. It's kind of calendar type format where you have color coding on each and every test, so it was compliant, missed, or non-compliant. And then there's summaries up top that just talk all about every single test. So, it could be hundreds of tests that were taken and this many were compliant, this many were missed, this many were non-compliant. But our compliance team, again, going back to them, super helpful. They do testimonies on request. It is an extra fee, but these are things that ensure that you're getting the right information admissible into court.
I was with a judge on Sunday, and I was talking about this upcoming podcast, and he was saying that since the pandemic, he's seen a lot of increase in alcohol-related cases and issues and just things of that sort. Are you seeing that on your end as well?
I am. We definitely saw an increase in I hate saying in business, but yes, in these cases coming forward and the use of our product, especially in family law. I think, we saw couples coming together for longer periods of time than they were used to. It became uncomfortable. And then after, the pandemic, they wanted to get a divorce, and then what we see is no longer is that what I call a natural monitor in place, which would be the other co-parent. And now we have to retrain ourselves how to responsibly drink without that natural co-parent. in the room at all times. I mean, my wife, again, she would say, okay, we're having, I'll have 2 beers tonight, or you have 2 beers tonight at dinner. We're monitoring ourselves without even knowing, to be honest. And I see that and I always laugh. And she's like, why are you laughing? I'm like, oh, I'm just thinking about things that I educate attorneys on. And it's funny that it's happening in real time here. But, that's what happens. Our significant others are our natural monitors. And then when those things go away, SoberLink is a great tool to empower that individual to prove their sobriety going forward.
Can you share with us just one of your favorite, like, happy outcome stories where someone was able to use your product and then it was ultimately successful and helpful in their case?
Yeah, I never thought I'd get into alcohol monitoring. So these testimonies of success, stories really keep me going, really keep me excited about educating about our product. And I remember this one dad who had, I believe, a 9-year-old daughter, and he was able to have a very upfront conversation about why he was using this technology. It was age appropriate, and it really resonated well and helped their relationship. But it was solidified by the moment that he went to go get his device one morning, and it comes in this protective case, and the protective case was bedazzled by the little girl. So she had put all these little rhinestones on it and tricked it up, and it made him feel so proud that she understands the importance of that technology so that she can see her dad. And so that was a reminder to him that this is really important for him to move on and earn that trust back to be able to see his daughter. Really cool story.
I've had cases where I've had clients that really do have a problem with alcohol.
Yeah.
And the other side will point it out, and my client won't admit it. But, when they're calling you at midnight every night and you can tell on the phone that maybe they were up imbibing too much. As attorneys, I think sometimes we get too in the weeds of fighting everything. And in this particular case, I actually got my client to agree to it. He saw fairly quickly that he did have a problem. And it was kind of the same story you had, his children. He realized, like, hey, I've got to get myself right. How have y'all worked in such a way to convince people this isn't a punishment?
Yeah.
This is an educational tool to help you get back to being the parent that you want to be.
Yeah, we've worked really diligently in trying to change the conversation, from something that is penal to something that is empowering. And it's taken a lot of time. I'll be honest. I mean, working with judges, working with, influencers to make sure that they understand that alcohol use disorder is not a moral failing. It is a disease, and we need to understand the disease to move forward in this relationship of co-parenting. And, when I talk to therapists, they tell me all the time how difficult it is when kids are taken away from parents that have problems like this, or bad relationships with alcohol, when they could just be going through a time where they could do something like SoberLink or other means to get help and stay in that child's life. Pulling that kid away from that parent is more detrimental anything in our mind. So we needed to make sure that we have a technology that can keep that parent in that.
Hi, this is Dan Cuneo with I Now Pronounce You Divorced. Thank you for taking time to listen to this week's podcast. Please join